Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Chemical Consultants Network March meeting. I'm Mike Michalczak, the chair of CCN. Chemical Consultants Network is a group of chemists and chemical engineers that advise members who are consulting or are interested in consulting. CCN provides expertise and resources to our members. We are a topical group at the Philadelphia section of the American Chemical Society, the ACS. We're also supported by AICHE. We hold monthly meetings on topics of interest, and for $35 per year, you can become a paid member, and paid members can create their own webpage on the CCN website to attract potential clients. You can sign up to be a member at chemicalconsultants.org. So our speaker tonight is Laura Burford. She is a business advisor for independent consultants and boutique consulting businesses and leverages her 30+ years of consulting experience to help consultants clarify their focus, get them clients, and make them money. Laura was also a panelist for our April 2019 joint meeting with IMC Philadelphia on keeping your consulting business relevant. So today she's going to give us her thoughts, and I think this is going to be an open discussion, so feel free to ask questions through the talk. And on a question which comes up a lot at CCN meetings, and that question is, what do the best consultants do to get clients? So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Laura.
Okay, I do have a presentation, so I'm going to bring the presentation up, but here's the deal. Some of you have been on presentations.
Embiid sells the same materials.
Ron, thank you, Ron. Here's the deal. Some of you have been on presentations with me before because I see Aaron here, and Aaron knows I try to keep things very informal. So I do want to keep this informal. I want you to ask questions, and I want to make sure you walk away with at least one thing that you can implement. So hopefully I do that. Here is part of the challenge. Mike was very nice to share the list of attendees the other day, and I made it a point to go look to see who was attending. And we have people with a variety of different backgrounds, people that have been consulting for 20, 30, even 40 years. And we have people that are just starting out. So hopefully this speech is relevant to everybody, this presentation, and hopefully, as I said, everybody walks away with at least one thing. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Shake your head for the people I can see. That gives me some feedback.
Yep.
I also want to make sure I answer questions for you. So please jot any questions you have in the chat. With as many people as we have on tonight, I can't do what I sometimes do, which is just say, if you have a question, just kind of holler it out. We just can't do that. So please put it in the chat. And if there is one thing in particular you would like to walk away with tonight, I would like you to put that in the chat right now, because that helps me make sure that if I can answer it, we will answer it. If that's fair, I hope it is. I appreciate you just dropping it in the chat. And at that, I am going to share a screen. So what do the best consultants do to get clients? Here's a question for you. And please feel free to drop this in the chat. How many times do you need to touch somebody before they become a client? What do you think? Mike, is anybody dropping anything in the chat there?
My wife says 8.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
There's a 4 and a 5 from the chat, a 7, a 3, 3. So that's 4, 7, 5, 3, 2.
Okay. Okay. The 8's not far off. 8's probably is in with range. There are tons of studies out there. Microsoft study talks about how many people disappear after one touch with a potential client, and that's 50%. But based on their study, they're saying 9 times you have to touch somebody before they become a client. And more people than not disappear before they get to that 9th touch. So getting clients is constantly staying in touch, staying on top of what you want to do so that you connect with somebody that you want to work with and who wants to work with you. But there's more to getting clients than staying in touch. And this is a study by Gartner a few years ago in 2019, so it's not that old. And it's talking about buying groups, but there's nothing out there that's just for consultants. But I think this pinpoints something that's very important. And so these two percentages, the 27% of your time that you have to spend researching independently online to find out information about your client, your customer, and the 18% researching independently offline. Stop to think about that. If you add those two numbers together, you're at 45%. That's a lot of time that you need to spend just doing research before you start connecting with people. And when I work with people, many times I hear, I don't know how to connect. And when we start talking about researching, they kind of freeze. But everybody has been taught how to research. If you wrote a paper, and I'm willing to bet just about everybody that's on this webinar tonight has written a paper at some point, you did some researching. So here are the rules, and I think I mentioned this already, so I'm not going to dive down into it. Let me know if there's anything in particular you would like to know, and ask questions as we go. I like questions. I would like this to be interactive, and even at certain points, if we want to start a discussion, I am more than open to starting a discussion.
So Laura, we have one question from Terrence Cooper, which is, what do you mean by touch?
Touch is sitting down and talking with them one-on-one or over a Zoom call. A touch could be an email. It's connecting with the person somehow. And we'll go into more detail in a few minutes with different types of touches, but both of those are touches. It is connecting with them in some way, shape, or form. Tonight, I could say that this session is for anybody that's frustrated, overwhelmed, confused, suspicious, bombarded with suggestions. I get tons of emails every day with people who have never spoken to me, giving me suggestions as to how I might be able to do X, Y, or Z. And I'm sure you do as well. It's also for the person that's been spending hours upon hours marketing and you've had no results. And you're concerned you might come across as a used car salesperson. But here's the most important thing. Tonight's session is for anybody who has a mindset to succeed, who's willing to say, hey, what do I need to do to get clients? My goal is to have you walk away with a better understanding of 5 strategic steps. And I know in the write-up, I said 4, but over time, I've changed this presentation so that I talk about 5 strategic steps. But I'm also going to provide you some tips and techniques. One of the things I have found, one of the things I totally believe in is you have to understand the big picture, the holistic picture of how to do something before you can start applying tips, techniques, and start using tools. So we're going to dive down into both, but in the time frame we have here, there's only so much I can cover. But I am also going to suggest you want to grab a piece of paper, pencil, pen, whatever, because you probably want to take notes. I had somebody listen to an earlier version of this presentation, and her comment to me is, I walked away with 5 pages of notes. So I do hope, as I said, everybody walks away with at least one tip or technique or some ideas, but feel free to take notes. Who I am, really brief. My name is Laura Burford. Most of you do not know me. Mike gave me a great intro, but I've been consulting for most of my professional career. I have 10 years Big Four experience. I've started consulting organizations for major corps, even international organizations before going out on my own. And one of the things I did was I made a lot of mistakes when I went out on my own. And I wish I could say it was just in one area, and it wasn't. But one of the areas I did make mistakes in was how to get clients. And over time, I fell back onto some approaches that I learned in my career working for Big Four. And by the way, I didn't start out as a consultant. I started out in industry. My undergrad was in accounting and statistics. I had dual undergrad, accounting and statistics. So when I graduated from college, I had a number of corporations interested in having me come work for them. Partly, I'll be honest, I don't hide it, I'm a female. And it was a time that they were looking to hire females as well. But I went through 2 management training programs, both in the technical industry in the early days of information tech. If you want to know more about me, please feel free to check out Laura's Consulting Guide. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always open to connecting with consultants on LinkedIn, but I'm going to give you a tip. And this is a consulting, get clients tip. Do not just ask me to connect, because I will not connect with you. Send me a message. You can hit the connect button. And when it says add a note, add a note. You have 300 characters, add a note. That is one way to help you connect with people and make it meaningful, because you want to have meaningful connections. Also, feel free to check out my YouTube channel. There are a lot of videos on there, some dealing with getting clients, and feel free to check out my blog articles. I now have started posting them on Medium. A few years ago, I wrote a book. It's still out on Amazon, and I still get a royalty check, but in 2013, it was a Small Business Book Award winner, 1 of 10, and it deals with project management, and it really deals with delivery, and it was written for the small business, the independent person. So high level, a little bit more information about me. As I said, I'm going to walk through, and what I'm going to talk about is how consulting is a relationship business. Many of us, when we went through school, and I know this happened to me when I went through my undergrad, I was taught entrepreneurial skills, but it was all around products. Selling a cup of tea, selling something in a retail store. But consulting is a relationship business. The product is you. It is not a tangible product as a cup of coffee. So you need to be able to build your business by building relationships, and meaningful relationships, because the people you want to connect with want to know that you're real. And when it comes to building a relationship business, there's 3 things that you need to do before you get to that proposal. The first is connect. The second is get to know. And the third is nurture, because you want to build trust. Years ago, I had somebody say to me, well, and I still have people say this, people want to work with people that they trust and like. I totally agree. But I also disagree with that comment. And here's the reason why. And I know some of the people that are on tonight are out on their own as consultants, and others go through third parties to get their work. When I was with Big Four, there were clients that I worked with that did not like me. The CEO of one of the major top 10 regional financial institutions at the time was quite blunt with me and said, I don't like you. And I sat there dumbfounded. I had a team of about 400 people, some of their employees, some of our employees, some third parties. And I looked at him and I said, why don't you like me? It had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with the fact that I was from the North and this financial institution was in Charlotte. He did not like anybody from above the Mason-Dixon line. We got along fine, but he never liked me. And I didn't particularly care for him. But I was there, and he made it quite clear, because he trusted me. Out of that team of 400 people, I was one of 2 people from the North. You honestly want to work with people that like you and want to work with you. But for those that are on this call and on here tonight, you might be faced and you might be in a situation where somebody doesn't particularly care for you, but you need to make sure you build a trusted relationship. This CEO trusted me. We'll dive down into this a little bit more. As a consultant, you want high value clients, and high value clients want to have the confidence that you can achieve the results you say you can achieve and build win-win relationships. This is not selling. You don't sell, you build relationships. You get to know people and you help them get to know you. So how in the world do you go about doing that? You want to build trust. You want to build the trust, as I said, and tonight I'm going to dive into the first three. I'm going to skip this here. And we're going to dive into the first of the 5 strategic steps. And I mentioned early on there's 5, and the write-up that was sent out said 4, and I added step 5 here mainly because as I was talking to people, I realized that there was something that was missing when it came to getting clients. And this something that was missing was their core. And many times when people come to me, not all the time, and they're struggling to get clients, I can tie back the reasons they're struggling to what I call their core. And the core is made up of, first, your focus, your why and your what. That one thing that you want to be known for. Your ideal client, your who. And for some of you, your point of view, your how. Clarify your core. It's your why, your what, your who, and your how. You got to have them solid. And if they're not solid, you're going to struggle to get clients. I'm not saying you won't get clients. You're going to struggle to get clients. I'm not diving down into how you come up with your focus tonight or how you can identify who your ideal client is or your point of view. I will let you know, though, that if you go out to my YouTube channel, there's videos on all of these. Help yourself to them. They're free. Help yourself to them. But I am going to dive down a little bit more into each of these because they impact how you get clients. I mentioned your focus as that one thing you want to be known for. And when it comes to your ideal client, we're talking about the characteristics and behaviors, the tangibles and the intangibles. What are they? So often people will give me the characteristics, but they forget about the behaviors. And it's the combination of the two that help you find and get your client. But not only do you have to define the characteristics and behaviors, you need to think, where do they hang out? And when I talk about where they hang out, I'm not just talking about where your ideal client hangs out. I'm talking about, where do the influencers hang out? Where do the connectors hang out or the referral people hang out? You got to identify them, and you need to do research in this area. I'm going to pause here for a second because I know people have asked me, well, where do I go? And here's a question for you, and to put it in the chat, and maybe we can share it with others that are on the chat. Where do you go to find your ideal client? Is there a particular association you go to? You're involved with the Chemical Consultants. It's a great organization from everything I've seen. But is this where you find ideal clients, or is this where you find referral partners? Is there a particular journal that you go to find your ideal client? So let me pause here for a second. And why don't, if you're willing to share in the chat where you might hang out or where your ideal client might hang out.
We've got a few, Laura. One is by connection. One is by Upwork and CollabTree.
Okay.
Most of my clients come from LinkedIn network and people that know my expertise.
Okay.
Conferences, face-to-face networking.
Okay? Yeah,
Second.
feel free to share. Share with other people on this call, on this Zoom call, because it's always good to help others. And you might have some place that you hang out that others might find helpful as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about LinkedIn as we go forward, because LinkedIn seems to come up all the time, particularly since COVID broke out. Okay. As you go forward with your focus and your ideal client, and this slide here is purposely here for people that are new to consulting. You want to take the time to validate your focus and your ideal client. And you want to connect with people that you know. Your focus is the one thing, your ideal client, the characteristics and the behaviors of people that might be interested in what you have to offer. The two have to work hand in hand, and you want to take the time to validate. On more than one occasion, I have watched somebody starting out do this validation and get a client. What that means is within probably 30 to 45 days of starting their consulting business, they have a client that wants to work with them and with whom they want to work to deliver a service that they want to be known for. You're connecting. You're getting to know them and they're getting to know you. A great way. Here is something else, and I'll mention you clarify your core. How often do you think you need to validate your focus and ideal client? Does anybody want to drop it in the chat or chime out?
Quarterly?
Quarterly? Okay. Yeah. Quarterly, I like doing it quarterly, at least once a year. I don't care if you've been in business 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, at least once a year. Last year during this pandemic, I did this more than once a quarter. But yes, you want to do this. So that is step one. You want to clarify your part of clarifying focus. The other part, and this is a step for you, an exercise. You want to deal with your point of view. And to deal with your point of view, you want to know what are the pain points or pleasure points and what are the results. Your point of view is your how. Your point of view is the one, outside of the one thing that you want to be known for, is the thing that helps differentiate you from your other consultants. It helps put you above the fray. Your point of view is your how. It is how you move or take somebody on that journey. How you move them from where they are today to where they want to be in the future. I'm going to go back a second. My point of view is the consultancy model. And it looks messy, but it's really not. But it's how I move somebody who's new to consulting, struggling with consulting, been around for a while and needs a refresher, from where they are to where they want to be of getting clients and making money. It is what I use to help dive down into my service offering. So you want to clarify your point of view. Another way to think of your point of view is if you get hurt, say you broke your leg, and you go to the doctor, and you think you're just going to get a cast, and the doctor says, oh no, hold on a minute. We have to put you in the hospital. We have to open you up, put a pin in, or a rod, or a plate. We have some work we need to do. You want to know that how, what's going on. Or if you hire somebody to help fix something in the house, you want to know how. I think a perfect example of a how and how this is so important is with a client I had early on when I went out on my own. When I first went out, I was working with IT, information technology, strategy kinds of things. And I had a client call and they said, we have a couple proposals here. It was actually 3 from 3 vendors who can provide outsourced network services, and I'm completely lost as to who was the right one to pick. All three proposals were within range. And when I say range, they were all plus or minus 10%. There was no difference in overall cost, what was going to cost. And there were a number of guarantees, and they were all there. All three had the same things. But in a short proposal, none of them had explained their how. After interviewing with all three of them, a decision was made as to which one to go with. And I'll be honest, it wasn't the low cost one. And it wasn't the high cost one. It was the one that was in the middle of the road. But what swayed the owner of the business, and it was a small business, they only had 25, 30 people at the time. Since then, they've now merged, they're much larger. It was the how that convinced that owner, that CEO, as to who to buy, who to hire. So your point of view helps put you steps ahead of everybody else. And if you're at the top of what I consider the consultant's ladder, that true trusted advisor, this is a must. I also have a current client who came up with a point of view, and she's going through third parties. This point of view has helped her deal with third-party vendors or consulting organizations, the really subcontracting organizations, in the fact that it has helped her narrow down which ones she wants to work with and which ones want to work with her. And she is getting top-notch, even through this pandemic, top-notch referrals or introductions into businesses who are interested in hiring her. So there are a number of ways you can use this. This is not your value prop. You use your value prop when you think about your focus. So that's step one. And as I said, I had eliminated that and just started here. And I realized I couldn't, because so much of here, this messy painting, ties to your core. You got to have that in place to help you get clients. At this point, before I move on, are there any questions?
So we've had a couple from the chat. I think most were related to, can you share your slides after the talk? Anybody have a question on the call?
Okay. We're going to dive down then. How's that, Mike? Here's where we start getting messy. So far, everything I talked about is kind of linear, even though they overlap. Now, nothing is linear. But I can only explain this from a linear perspective. So it gets messy. You need to build relationships, and to build relationships, you need to build awareness. And one way to build awareness is with what I consider active awareness techniques and tactics: strategic networking, referrals, and targeted outreach. Another way to do it is passive: writing, speaking, videos, pictures. Passive. Active, one-on-one, getting to know people. Passive, what I'm doing right now. The easiest way to get clients is the easiest and best way, particularly if you're starting out, is following and using active awareness techniques and tactics. If you're just starting out, unless you're already writing, speaking, doing videos, creating images, podcasts, whatever, I recommend you hold off for a while. Particularly if you're looking to get clients. Passive people have to come to you, and the timeline tends to be longer. I'm not saying don't do it, particularly if you're already doing it. But what I'm saying is spend your time focused on the active awareness techniques and tactics if you're trying to build relationships and get clients. And what I'm going to highlight mainly through the rest of this are the active techniques and tactics. LinkedIn is a tool that can help you with the active as well as the passive awareness capabilities. Again, consulting is a relationship business, and I'm now going to dive down into connecting, getting to know, and nurturing. So step 2 is connect. Back in the core, I'm recommended, or I've said, you need to figure out what your ideal client looks like. What are the characteristics and behaviors? And you have to figure out where to find them, because if you can't find them, you don't have an ideal client. And as you find them, as you find potential clients, you want to categorize them. And you want to categorize them into, I use 3 categories. I know people that use 4 and some others that use 5. I even know one that uses 7. To me, 7 is just way too complicated, into at least 3 categories. You can call them category 1, 2, or 3. You can call them category A, B, C. I don't care. What you want to do is you want to take a step back and say, I only have so many hours in the day. And if I'm working with a client, I have to be very focused as to how I continue to connect and get clients. So you want to break them down. You want to come up with 10 or 20 that I consider A, high potential connections, high potential people that you think might be interested in what you have to offer. 10 to 20. But you notice the word I say connections, because those connections could be influencers, they could be referral partners, or they could be truly targeted ideal clients. These are the companies that you believe you can do the best. Companies, I shouldn't say companies, it's people, because people hire you, companies don't. Best people to hire you and move you forward. The second is the selected potential connections, and the bottom are ideal client disconnections. These are the over 100. This list of selected is usually somewhere between that 20 and 100 category, and I'll go into this a little bit more. Also, as I go through steps 2, 3, and 4, I will explain them, but at the end, I have a couple of examples that might help things jump out a little bit. So how do you connect with a small group of targeted high potential connections? You want to use a targeted direct outreach approach. This is direct mail, email, LinkedIn, referrals, one-on-one strategic networking events, targeted referrals, strategic, really connecting one-on-one. Let me give you an example of, I can use an example of a client, but another way that you can use targeted outreach. And for those that are on here who have heard me speak before, you will recognize this because I've used this example before. This targeted outreach approach can help you get clients, but it can also help you in other aspects of your consulting business. You noticed I wrote a book, went out in 2013, it's still available, but when I wrote that book, I was in a position where I was not allowed to go anywhere. I was kind of stuck due to a medical, I had fallen and I hurt myself and I had to stay put. My husband said to me, how are you going to publish this book? I said, well, if nobody's interested in, I will self-publish, but I didn't have to self-publish. I took a targeted outreach approach. I looked to see where people hang out who might be interested in publishing a book on project management. I went to the library and I did some research. I did research online to figure out who are the publishers that are interested in publishing project management books, not fluff, but serious, and not too serious. I took the time to do searches on LinkedIn. I found out everything I could possibly find out about the editor for that publishing house. I came up with 11 publishing houses. They were divided into 3 categories, A, B, and C. I wrote targeted letters, letters, I won't say letters because some went as letters, others went as emails to each of those editors. Within 60 days, I had a deal with a publisher. Now, when I talk about publishers, I'm not talking small guys. McGraw-Hill came back to me and said, we can't publish this, but we have an arrangement with AMA, American Management Association. Well, I had American Management Association on my list, but AMA was interested, and McGraw-Hill was actually interested. They just couldn't publish it because they were not publishing any more books with project management. And I didn't know that. I missed that. I didn't see that in any of my research. But AMA came out with and offered me a deal. I had reached out to Kogan Page. Kogan used to be based here in Philly, and they had relocated to the UK. But the editor sent me a note with email. Love it. Can't publish it. I'm publishing something very similar, but let me connect you with Palgrave Macmillan, a great referral. And the other one was J. Ross, which is the old CRC, and they were interested. 3 deals within 45 days, 3 offers within 45 days, a deal within 60 to 90 days. And I was able to negotiate my own terms with J. Ross, where I kept copyright, and I was offered a payment schedule that they, as the editor said, we don't offer this to first-time writers. That is the same approach I take when I target potential clients. It takes time, but the comment I'm making, this example ties back to that first slide I showed, where 45% of your time to connect with clients deals with research. The second category is selected potential connections. Outreach campaigns, email, LinkedIn, direct mail, referrals, networking events, online and in person, like this, and targeted speaking. As you notice, I've moved away with this category into some softer things, passive things. And then the last, referrals, contact management, the articles, the blogs, the podcast interviews. For those that are on this call and in listening to this presentation, if you're new, you want to focus on the targeted high potential connections to begin with. As I said, the example I gave, yep, it was a book, but that's the same approach I use with clients, my targeted high potential connections. It's relationship building, and you build relationships. So the first step is you want to connect. And you want to think of this stage as, for those that know who Harry Potter is, the sorting hat on Harry Potter, because you want to sort things. You want to go back and look at your connections. Who do you know? And then you want to start doing research and sort them. At the top, you want to use active awareness techniques. Bottom, passive. And people will move up and down this list as you work on getting clients. So that's step 2. So here's my recommendation to anybody here. Go through your connections. Think about your connections. Look at them and break them down into categories. Do they fit your ideal client criteria? Do you think they'd be interested in what you have to offer? And go forward from there. So step 2 is all about connecting and figuring out who you want to connect with and the best way to connect. Step 3 is what I call the get to know stage. You need to display credibility. Getting back, people want to have confidence. They want to know that you can provide what you say. And this all ties to your actions, your words, and your feelings. This ties to asking the right questions and diving down, displaying your experience and expertise, and listening. You want to listen more than you talk. You don't want to be doing the talking. When you ask the right questions, you want to ask exploratory questions, explicit questions. You want to dive down. You want to get as much out of them as possible so that they get to know you, you get to know them, and you want to display credibility. So how in the world do you display credibility? Well, one way, if you're a professional, is with the help of social media, particularly with everything that's been going on in the last year, which means you need to have a professional profile on LinkedIn and a professional one if your clients hang out on Facebook. But I'm only going to talk about LinkedIn here. As I said early on, and some of you might not have been on yet, when I made it a point to try to go through and look at people's profiles so I could get a feel of the people that were attending tonight. And as I said, things were all over the place. When I say all over the place, some people had lots of experience, some didn't, some were still working, some were working, but doing this part-time on the side. So things were varied. But it was the professional profile that helped me figure out what tonight's audience was like. And you want to have a professional profile. And that includes having an up-to-date picture that looks professional. I don't expect to see the same kind of picture on Facebook. Even you can have the same picture on Facebook as well as LinkedIn, but Facebook many times tends to be a little bit more informal, but you want a professional looking picture on LinkedIn. You want to write your about section with the client in mind. Everything that you do when it comes to consulting and every decision you make occurs because you think about your client. What would your client like to see? You want a banner. And you want that. And you want to make sure you make it easy for people to connect with you. I tried to hire somebody a few months, well, before the pandemic started, hire somebody, and I was given their name, and I couldn't figure out how to connect with them. They didn't have their email address. They didn't have a telephone number. The only thing I could do was connect with them and send them a message as I was connecting. Because I couldn't even find them in a LinkedIn group where I could send a message. So you want to make sure you have a professional profile because that's one of the first places that people go to look for you. So you want to make sure it's up to date. Are there other things with professional profile? Oh yeah. I haven't used my business cards in over a year. And I was never a big one on business cards to begin with, but you want to have a professional looking business card. Do you need a website? Well, here's the thing. If you're starting out, no. If you've been in existence for a long time, you don't necessarily need it if you have a solid professional profile. And when somebody's starting out, I usually tell them to put it on hold, even if they want one, because they're still trying to hone in on that core stuff. But for $35 that Fred, I'm going to ask you to get off mute. Wasn't it $35 and they could get their own? Put a plug in here, Fred.
Yes.
Okay.
And one of the great features of it, brief commercial, is it's easy. You don't need to be a web person. It's just kind of fill in the essentials, and $35 a year, and you have a web presence with an incredibly illustrious group of people.
Okay. See, Fred, you gave me a chance to grab a little water.
Good.
Thank you. So that's a good place to go. But there's other things as well. Your point of view is one of your credibility essentials. So take the time to create your own point of view. If you don't know how to create your own point of view, I mentioned I put blog articles out on Medium. There's a written article there. There's also a video on the YouTube channel and both have an exercise that takes about 15 minutes. Let me see. Is Aaron still on here? Yeah, Aaron, you've looked at the video on point of view, right?
Yeah, and a little earlier, I entered in the chat that the focus, the ideal client, and the point of view exercises were really important to me to try and really zone in on what I need to do with this consulting business. And the videos do point in, go through the exercises pretty well, or at least lay it out so you can sit there and work it through. So I think that point of view, and that kind of leads to the brand message. Yeah, it's all essential stuff, and would have been much better in the middle of 2018 when I was just getting into this. So.
But your point of view will change. Mine changes all the time. It's always being refined and modified. But it is key for consultants to help them stand out. Having a good brand message is one of your credibility essentials. For some of you, having a lead magnet might be important. A lead magnet is a leave behind that can tie to your point of view, but might give some additional information. For others, third-party content. There's a study out there. You take that study and you add your comments to that study. And you're going to use that to help you build credibility. And I'll come back to that. Testimonials. Testimonials are great. But here's the thing. I tell people they have to have testimonials. I have testimonials. But here's the thing. Is anybody ever going to put a terrible testimonial out there? Probably not. But testimonials help. I'm not going to say they don't, and they are a credibility essential. Intellectual property. You're chemical consultants. Some of you probably have patents. Others of you have other intellectual property. Your intellectual property is one of your credibility essentials. And stories and case studies. Somebody said to me that, I can't do this getting client stuff because I'm an introvert. Well, here's the thing. Introverts are really good at getting clients. In some cases, they're better at getting clients than extroverts. And one of the reasons is I have found introverts tend to be better storytellers. So you want to have your stories. They're your credibility essentials. They're going to tie to your focus, your ideal client, your point of view, and they're going to help explain how you get the results that you say you're going to get. They help build that confidence. So step 3 is all about getting to know the other person, where you do most of the listening, you ask the questions, and they respond, and you dive down. You get to know one another. And I'll come back to this with an example in a few minutes. So step 3, here's your homework. What are your credibility essentials? Think about it. If you want a checklist of the credibility essentials, and it's more than a checklist, and there's probably more that I can add to it, and as a matter of fact, I probably will be. But if you go out to my website, there are a number of free resources. There's a tab in the header that says resources. There is a document you can download that talks about, I think, 9 of the credibility essentials. And there's descriptions to help you pull together your own credibility essentials. And when people work with me, as we're clarifying the focus, ideal client, and the point of view, we actually start working on the credibility essentials because they help you figure out what is that one thing you want to be known for. Step 4 is all about nurturing. You just continue. You provide value. You actually help them. Help could be helping them personally as well as professionally. But I've provided people intros to other people, and they've never become clients. You want to be responsive, proactive, easy to work with. You want to build those win-win relationships. Before I go into an example, does anybody have any questions? Because I'm going through tons of material here.
Anybody have any questions? Sounds like silence.
Yeah, okay. Because it is at step 4, when this nurturing gets to this win-win relationship, somebody says to you, can you help me? And you're in a position work on coming up with an approach, a price, and a proposal. Or you're in a position to say, you know what? I've been listening to you. Are you interested in working with me? So that's step 4. Let's go through a couple examples. And I'm going to stick to 10 to 20 to begin with. Because I'm making an assumption, and assumptions aren't great, but I'm making an assumption that most of you are going to try to focus at least somewhat in the 10 to 20 to do some focusing on some key people to deal with. So let's deal with the first one. You've sent a LinkedIn message. You just took the time and you got on LinkedIn and you did some research. You went and you researched to see who might be interested in your service. And because there's people in different areas here, I'm not going to pick on one. So you go on, you find somebody, and you take the time to look and you find their email address. You say, great, I have their email address. I'm not going to send them a message through LinkedIn. I'm going to send them a very targeted email letter, asking if they'd be interested in meeting with me. A face-to-face meeting. And the face-to-face meeting today could be with Zoom. But you want to give them a reason why you want to meet with them. You know, when people contact me and they say, hey, I heard that you might be a good contact for me. Can we meet? One of the first things I ask for is an agenda. You want to make sure that you give them an agenda. Why are you meeting? And if somebody contacts me and says, hey, I think we would be good partners, and they can't give me an agenda, I usually don't set up the meeting. So you want to connect with them with a meaningful message. And I used email here. That message very easily could have been through LinkedIn. But I found the email sometimes works a little better for some people. Partly because if I'm not connected with them, and I can't send a message through a group, because if you both are in the same group, you can send a longer message using the connection in a group. Email works great. And here's the thing, if you can't find their email address on LinkedIn, but they do have a website, and I know you don't necessarily need a website, but they do have a website, you can get the email there. There's other ways to get the email, but I'm just using that as an example. You want to ask for a meeting, you want an agenda. And one of the best ways to connect and help start displaying credibility is to provide a one-on-one high-value briefing. This high-value briefing can vary. It can be, hey, here's what I have would like to provide you this study that talks about competitors in your industry and provide you what I think about this study. And I'm sure if you think about it, you can come up with some different things that are of high value. And you keep talking to people and you ask their opinions. And you go back and forth with this briefing. Your job as you go back and forth with this briefing is to get to know them and for them to get to know you. You might want to ask them what is their biggest priority based on this briefing for the future. As you go through this briefing, even though you might be talking about your opinions, you might have some other information you want to share based on the questions they ask. And when you're done, you want to summarize the meeting with them and ask if they would like to discuss it some more. And if you have some additional information, maybe you want to share that additional information. Your goal with this meeting is to see if they're interested in keeping the discussion going, to getting to know you more. You want to position yourself for some follow-up. And that takes you to the next step where you're showing reliability, you're nurturing. You follow it up. And for each person in this 10 to 20, you want to come up with an individual plan and work the plan. That's one way to do it. But keep in mind, if you talk to them and they're not interested in staying in touch, maybe they're saying, you know what, I hear you, let's kind of connect in 3 months. You want to move them down the list to the 100 list. But let's look at another example. And this is for somebody that's in the 100 list area. They found you because when you were on a virtual meeting. I know I've been on numerous virtual meetings, and I'm sure every one of you has been on a virtual networking meeting over the past 12 months. And they liked your brand message and they want to connect. Or you like their brand message and you want to connect. But as you look at them, you're not sure if they really meet your ideal client criteria. You might have a high value briefing. You might just have a discussion over a topic. But these are people that you want to follow up with at least once a month to show reliability. And you might move them up the list, or you might move them down the list. And the over 100 list, these are your lead magnets, sending people free reports. There's many times I get on a virtual meeting and people want to connect with me, and I'm more than willing to connect. But as we talk, they're not interested in what I have to offer right now, but I want to stay in touch with them. So they get the free reports, the checklist, the webinars. And you want to follow up on your lead magnet with automated emails. And you want to reply to interactive emails and determine if you want to move them up the list. This is an example of what I'm talking about. On that 10 to 20, you want to be very cognitive of the fact that you need to stay in touch. You need to connect. 10 to 20 works great because you can touch everybody at least once a month. The same way with the 100 list. Now you're probably sitting back saying, well, wait a minute, this is a lot of work. If I'm doing this, how am I connecting with and working and providing services? I do this every day. And that ties to the last of the 5 strategic steps. You got to work it daily. You develop and you work an action plan. And for those in the 10 to 20, you have relationship individual action plans. For those in the up to 100 category, you reach out once a month. Over 100, a connect plan, a content plan. I spend a half hour a day on connecting with people. On Monday mornings, I spend 3 hours with marketing and thinking about what I'm going to do in all these categories. And 3 hours is the max, but a half hour every day. That is it. So you need to think about what you can do daily, weekly, and monthly. And I actually have a spreadsheet that I use to help me, saying, here's what I'm going to do with targeted outreach. Here's what I'm going to do with networking. Here's what I'm going to do with referrals. And every day, one of the last acts I do is I say, yep. My goal is not so much what I've done daily, but what I've done weekly and what I've done monthly. A half hour. How can you do a half hour? Well, think of it this way. You're reading in the morning. I read in the morning. I'm reading the morning news, and I see an article that I want to send to that I think one of my people that's on that 100 list might be interested in. I send it to them. Took me a few seconds to forward that article onto them. Connect with one new person. I'm willing to bet if you've been on networking events, you've connected with one new person at least. once a week. I do it daily. Sometimes I connect with 5 new people in one day. So you want to work it. You want to do it daily. At this point, does anybody have any questions? Because I've been talking quite a bit here.
So we have a couple in the chat. One is, how do you handle people that do not respond either to email or LinkedIn messages?
Sometimes people are not going to respond. Other times I pick up the phone and call, because some people prefer phone calls over email and LinkedIn. So you need to figure out what does that person, what is the communication method that that person likes, and how will they respond? The person that asked the question, if they want to take themselves off mute and provide me some more substance to that question, I will gladly respond in a little bit more detail.
Hi, I think this the question really corresponds to that sort of B, and C level,
Okay.
where you may be reaching out to people you know or have a second degree association with, and you're trying to make a contact or use them as a bridge to another contact, and you just get sort of the silent treatment.
Yeah,
as
you
it
get
were.
ghosted basically.
Yeah.
Okay. I try 3 times and then I let it go. If there's somebody I really want to connect with, if I've sent it via email and I haven't heard, then I'll try LinkedIn. And if LinkedIn doesn't work, I'll pick up the phone and call. And if I still don't get a response, then I just let it go. Because you've tried 3 times, and if they're not interested, they're not interested. And you've tried 3 different methods. You also want to make sure when you send these emails, they're targeted and they provide something of interest as to why they want to connect. I have found sometimes people have not been very thorough or very clear with how they're sending their message. So they're not grabbing the person. You want something that grabs the person. Okay. Hopefully I answered that question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Laura, I have 2 questions. One is, how useful is it to have a website? I ask this because I had a website for about 5 years. I'm paying the host all those years, but I never got contacted by any prospective client other than analytical instrument vendors and staffing agencies.
So I didn't quite catch your question, kind of faded out on me there. So what was the question? I heard what the symptoms are, but what was the question?
Oh, the question is, how useful is it to have a website? Yeah.
Yeah.
I did. It didn't help me for 5 years. I stopped it.
Yeah.
So how is this really helpful?
For some people it is helpful, and for others it isn't. But that's one reason I say make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date, because that's going to come up in the search engines a lot faster than your website is. If you have a website and you don't have all the search engine optimization that's going on, it's sometimes hard to find your website unless somebody knows to go to look for it.
Okay.
So I really strongly recommend people make sure that their LinkedIn profile is up to date and current, and it's written for their client. I've had people go to my website because they've looked at my LinkedIn profile and then they've gone to the website and picked up stuff off my website. And I've had other people go to my website, but my website comes up when you do a search on my name. And something that you want to do is go into You can use Google. Google works just as well as Firefox or any of them. Do a search on your name and see how many times you see your name on the first page, first or second page.
Okay.
And if you see your website there, that's great. If you don't, then it's not getting picked up. I know mine gets picked up on the first page. Okay, so there's a lot more behind it, but I always tell people, make sure your LinkedIn profile, which is easy to find, and people go to LinkedIn to find out about a person, is up to date.
Yeah.
Okay, you said you had a second question?
Second question is, how is it possible to find clients at conferences like ACS conference or BitCon, for instance?
Yeah, is it possible to find clients at conferences? Yeah, I have found clients at conferences, but I make sure I do research to make sure I go to the right conferences.
Uh-huh.
And then I make it a point to look to see who has tables or booths,
Uh-huh.
and figure out which of those vendors, and I'm putting that in quotes, I want to connect with and go forward from there. A perfect example, when I first started out on my own, I went to a conference here in the Philly area, and I connected with a vendor, a company that relied on financial services industries for their business. And at the time, I still had a strong financial services background. And I met with the general manager that was there, and then met with the owner 2 or 3 weeks later. And within less than 6 months, it was less than 6 months. I'm going to say it's about 4 months. They became a client, and they stayed a client of mine for almost 5 years. But I picked them up at a conference, and I've picked up others, but I'm just using that one as an example. But I stayed in contact with that general manager until he retired last year. And he referred other people to me. Okay. So yeah, conferences are great, but you have to work the conference. And when I say work the conference, make sure it's the right conference for you. And when you go, you know who you want to connect with.
Thank you.
Again, research. Mike, any other questions there?
We've had a couple of questions asking you if you could post your charts afterwards, and I think that's probably a yes, right?
Send me an email and I'll provide you the chart, the information.
Okay. And then we had a question about whether you think the premium account on LinkedIn is worth the cost.
I don't use the premium account. Let me leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay, I don't use it, and I use LinkedIn every day.
And then we just had a question that says, any thoughts about how to get a client back after you lost them?
Ooh, tough one. Tough one. Sometimes it depends on why you lost them. I know I lost a client it's over 10 years ago now. I lost a client because they had a government connection. They could only work with me for 5 years. Now, they did call me after a year hiatus, but I decided not to work with them again because for a number of reasons. And it was nothing against them. I just decided not to work with them. So, sometimes you can do nothing about it. If you've lost a client, you might be able to get them back, but I recommend people work and do everything they possibly can do to not lose a client. I know I lost one client because I lost sight and did not constantly nurture that relationship. And I could have kicked myself after I lost that client. You have to constantly work that relationship. Once you've lost them, it's really hard sometimes to get them back. You have to find out why you lost them. You have to find out why you lost them. And even when I lost a client that I was not happy I sat down with the economic buyer and said, why did you go elsewhere? And what came out was, well, we went elsewhere because we didn't think you could help us with X, Y, and Z. I had actually I lost out because I didn't stay in touch. I didn't continue to nurture that relationship. So now any major client I have, I nurture the relationship. We meet either weekly or monthly. We stay in touch. We make sure it's a win-win relationship. Can you get them back? Maybe. I'm sure that's not what you wanted to hear.
Are there any other questions? One was, what's your email? And I think it's in our meeting notice.
Yeah, and I'll provide it to you in a few seconds. How's that?
Great.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, let's thank Laura for a great talk.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm not done yet.
Okay.
Okay, let me finish here. I just took a pause. As I said, consulting is a relationship business. Credibility, reliability, leading to trust. You want to build ideal client awareness, enabling you to build trusted relationships. The 5 steps: core, connect, get to know, nurture, and you got to work it daily. Very possible. Now, here are a couple things for you to help you. Everything here is free. Help yourself to it. There's free documents out on my website. There's one on credibility essentials. I think the linked one is out there. I would have to check, but it will be out by tomorrow morning. If it's not there, I'll double check. There are videos, numerous videos. There's a playlist just on focus and ideal client, one on point of view, credibility. Aaron mentioned that he's gone through some of them. There's a playlist just on getting clients that talks about targeted outreach and referrals with ideas and tips. And there's articles out on Medium dealing with trusted relationships. I'm going to put one little plug in for me. And this isn't the only minor little plug here. I do have a program. It's called the Consulting Jumpstart Blueprint. It's based on my consultancy model. It's being reintroduced because I introduced it during the pandemic. It's being reintroduced, even though it's been out there. And I'm doing a special program that's going to start on April 19th for 13 weeks. This program is for anybody new to consulting, anybody that's been struggling as a consultant, anybody that needs a refresher, somebody that's been working for a business and wants to go back to consulting. It's a solid program. I had somebody who went through parts of this program 4 years ago, and she talked to me the other day and said, you know, I could use a refresher, and her business has thrived through this pandemic. Can I go through this and take it again? I'm like, sure, that's part of my deal. You can take it whenever you want and jump on. If you're interested in knowing more about it, go to my website, drop me an email. My email is real easy. It's laura@lauraburford.com. You can jump on the calendar. You can find a link to the calendar on my website. Help yourself to this material, to the free material that says free resources on the website. But if you want to talk about this some more, please drop me a note. Find time on the calendar. I don't let everybody into the program because I want to make sure it's a fit and you can win. I want people to win. So that's why you have to talk to me a little bit. That's all I'm going to discuss there of my services, because I do provide one-on-one as well as this program. Help yourself to the freebie stuff. The YouTube channel's there, Medium. Additional webinars are posted on my website. And I'm offering everybody a 30-minute time if they want to talk to me. Just grab time on my calendar. With that, now I'm done. How's that?
Thank you, Laura, for a great talk. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So if anybody has any questions, reach out, please.
Yes, I captured the chat. So I'll go save it one more time, but I think I got it all. And next month, we're having Ron Bohofsky and David Volshing talking about effective collaboration between scientists and engineers. So look forward to having a good talk on next month. Thanks again to Laura. And if there's any more questions, then the meeting is done. Thank you again. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Bye.